Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm SamyCaps, and today we're talking about one of the biggest upcoming releases in the ARPG world, Path of Exile 2. As the November 15th early access release approaches, the PoE community has had plenty to say. There are both concerns and excitement about the direction Grinding Gear Games is taking with this new chapter in the Path of Exile franchise. Now, in this video, we're going to break down three key sections. One, the major changes in PoE 2 that are sparking conversation within the community. Two, the challenges that I suspect Grinding Gear Games will face in the early days of Path of Exile 2. And third, the three player camps I believe will emerge when early access launches on November 15th. And finally, I'm going to wrap it all up and give you my final thoughts. So I hope you stick around until the end. We have a lot to cover. Let's get to it. Now, let's dive into the big changes that are coming with Path of Exile 2 and why these have sparked both excitement and concern in the community. Number one, the increased difficulty. Grinding Gear Games has really ramped up the challenge in Path of Exile 2. Regular enemies are going to hit harder, and bosses are now more than just bullet sponges. This means combat will require more strategy and preparation. While some players love the challenge, there's definitely concern that it could make the game feel punishing, especially for more casual players. But here's the thing. This increased difficulty is what will make victories feel more rewarding, and for those who enjoy a challenge, this will be a breath of fresh air. Secondly, the slower pace. One of the biggest shifts in PoE 2 is the move away from the blasting screens of enemies playstyle. Path of Exile is known for its fast pace, kill everything in sight builds, but in PoE 2, you'll need to be more deliberate. Combat is slower and more methodical, but this opens the door for deeper, more meaningful encounters. Some players may miss the faster pace, but for others, this slower, more tactical approach will feel like a necessary evolution of the genre. Third, longer campaign. In Path of Exile, most experienced players can blast through the campaign in approximately 4 to 6 hours. However, Path of Exile 2 is designed to have a longer, more immersive campaign, which will take significantly more time to complete. Some might see this as a downside, especially if they just want to reach the end game quickly. But I see it as a chance to really get immersed in the world of Rayclass and experience more varied, rich content. And lastly, situational combat. If you were a fan of the one-button builds in Path of Exile, then here's the kicker. Those days might be behind you. In Path of Exile 2, combat is more situational, and you'll need to rely on a variety of skills depending on the encounters you face, and will be rewarded for doing so. This might be a major adjustment for veteran players who are used to streamlined builds, but for new and returning players, it will make the game feel more engaging and dynamic. Personally, I think this change is necessary to push the game forward and keep things fresh. Now, while I believe Grinding Gear Games is taking PoE 2 in the right direction, personally, there are definitely going to be challenges in the early days of its release. Here are the key hurdles I see Grinding Gear Games facing. 1. Balancing difficulty. With regular enemies and bosses being harder, the key challenge will be finding the right balance. If the game is too difficult out of the gate, casual players might feel alienated. Grinding Gear Games will need to carefully monitor feedback and adjust accordingly. 2. Adjusting to the slower pace. There's no doubt that the shift to a slower paced combat system is going to create friction for players who love the fast-paced action of Path of Exile. Grinding Gear Games will need to show why this slower pace offers a more rewarding experience without losing the thrill of facing hordes of enemies. 3. Longer campaign and player patience. In today's gaming world, many players just want to speed run to the end game. But with PoE 2's longer campaign, Grinding Gear Games will need to convince players that the journey is just as important as the destination. This is a challenge in an era where quick rewards dominate gaming culture. And lastly, combat depth and complexity. As mentioned earlier, one-button builds will no longer be as viable in PoE 2. Players will need to adjust to using more complex combat strategies. Some might find this frustrating, but I believe this change will create a more engaging and varied combat system in the long run. These challenges are real, but in my opinion, GGG is doing the right thing by taking PoE 2 in a new direction. They're creating a game that can appeal to both hardcore players and newcomers, which is exactly what's needed for the long-term success of this franchise. Now, let's talk about the 3 types of player camps that I think will emerge when Path of Exile 2 launches. And that is camp number 1, the player that's only gonna play Path of Exile and not play Path of Exile 2. I refer to them as the PoE loyalists. These are the players who have fallen in love with the original PoE and are concerned about the changes in PoE 2. They enjoy the fast-paced action, the screen-clearing builds, and are worried that the slower, more methodical pace of PoE 2 won't appeal to them and therefore will only play Path of Exile. Camp number 2 is the PoE 2 enthusiast camp. This is the group that's excited for the changes. They love how PoE 2 is more approachable for new players and the introduction of deeper, more strategic combat. They're looking forward to boss fights that feel more rewarding, even if the overall game is slower. These are players that have typically stayed away from Path of Exile because it's not as approachable, so they are PoE 2 enthusiasts, and they will only play Path of Exile 2. The third and last camp that I believe is going to be created and emerge when PoE 2 launches is the player that's going to play both Path of Exile and Path of Exile 2. I refer to them as the hybrid player. Those are players who will enjoy both games. They're going to embrace the differences and switch between PoE and PoE 2, enjoying the variety of playstyles that both games offer, whether it's the complexity of the skill tree in the original or the refined systems of PoE 2. They'll appreciate what each game brings to the table. Which camp do you think you're going to fall into? Drop a comment and let's hear your thoughts and opinion on it. I would love to hear it. And the last camp is going to be the player camp that will play both Path of Exile and Path of Exile 2. These are players that will enjoy both games. I call them the hybrid player. They'll embrace the differences and switch between PoE and PoE 2, enjoying the variety of playstyles that both games offer, whether it's the complexity of the skill tree in the original or the refined systems of PoE 2. They'll appreciate what each game brings to the table. Now, with the release of any new game, you are always going to have criticisms, you're always going to have optimism, and it's just the nature of the industry. And I don't think Grinding Gear Games and Path of Exile 2 is going to be immune to that. They are going to get criticism, they're going to get praise, and everything in between. But the topics that I discussed in this video, I just wanted to highlight because I truly do believe this is going to surface when Path of Exile 2 launches on November 15th. And I do believe, and again, it's my opinion, I do believe there are going to be 3 player camps when Path of Exile 2 launches. There's going to be the loyalists to Path of Exile that just does not like the direction Path of Exile 2 is going, and they're just going to play Path of Exile. They don't want anything to do with PoE 2. And then you have the player, whether they're currently enjoying Path of Exile and like it, and like the direction that Path of Exile 2 is going, but they find Path of Exile too complicated, they don't have enough time, or they're a player that wants to play Path of Exile, but because of those reasons, never engaged with the game. I believe that player is going to play Path of Exile 2 exclusively. They don't want anything to do with Path of Exile for the reasons mentioned. And then lastly, you have the hybrid player, and I believe that's the camp I'm going to fall on. The hybrid player likes playing Path of Exile. They have no problems with it. They enjoy it. They like the complexity, but they also like the changes and where Path of Exile 2 is going. So since we already know that PoE is going to still be supported and the leagues are going to be staggered, the hybrid player will enjoy both and go back and forth between the two. And I put myself in that camp. At least that's what I suspect is how I am going to engage with both games. So I, in my opinion, believe this is where the camps are going to be divided. Where are you going to land? What are your thoughts? Are you going to stick with PoE because you don't like what you're seeing on PoE 2? Are you someone that's never played Path of Exile, but you're excited with the accessibility to new players that PoE 2 brings? Or are you someone like myself that likes everything you're hearing and you're going to enjoy both? Let me know in the comments section on my video. Would love to hear your comments and opinions. Anyway, that'll do it for me, everybody. Thank you for watching. And as always, if you can like, comment, and subscribe, I would really appreciate your support. And don't forget to come and watch me live on Twitch. Channel name is SamyCaps. When Path of Exile 2 launches on November 15th, I will be streaming the crap out of that game. All right, everybody. Thank you for watching. And as always, take care. The opinions expressed in this video are mine and solely mine. Healthy debate is always encouraged. Hate is never welcomed. So get over it.